Welcome back for another edition of Revolution Recap, coming to you after the Revolution had a two-game week, which started, both games at home, which started against Philadelphia on Wednesday. In that game, the Revolution drew 1-1, taking a lead through Brandon Bye in the 31st minute, but then conceding a late goal in the 84th minute to Philadelphia to end up just settling for a draw on that one. And then on Saturday, the roles turned a bit, where the Revolution fell behind early in this game in the 25th minute, only to come back on a goal from Antonio De La Mea, his first of the season, and a rare start for him, too, since Bruce Arena has taken over. In the 51st minute, tied the game up, and then Teal Bunbury in stoppage time put the game away for the Revolution, winning it 2-1. So the Revolution come away from this week with 4 points. Jake Catanese joins me today. And Jake, you know, the one question that you keep asking people, and I think you sent it into the Revolution Recap Twitter account, are the New England Revolution actually good at soccer? I'm going to let you answer that one.
You know what? This is probably going to answer this question in a full question and answer preview with our wonderful friends at the Burgundy Wave on SB Nation. Because the next game New England plays is against the Colorado Rapids, who are on a 7-game unbeaten streak, while New England's on a 6-game unbeaten streak, and both of us have sacked our managers within that time frame to start these wonderful streaks. I would like to think the answer of the New England Revolution, are they good at soccer? I don't know if they're good, but at least I know, at the very least, they're not bad anymore. And under Brad Friedel and Anthony Hudson, these teams were bad. And now that you have gotten rid of the anchor weighing you down, you can actually see, okay, these rosters, maybe we're not playoff teams. Maybe we're not going to get to the conference semifinals or what have you in the playoffs, but at the very least we know we don't completely suck.
You know, you bring up the Colorado Rapids, and if you had told me that Connor Casey was going to turn that team around, I don't want to digress too far off the path, but I don't know who saw that one coming, especially with, you know, all the stories I heard about how little film Connor Casey watched, and how I think there were stories out there how he didn't like watching soccer and things like that. I don't know about you, but I did not see that one coming.
Listen, somehow I think because Connor Casey is kind of sort of an MLS legend of sorts, and in particular a Rapids legend, somehow Connor Casey as a player's coach with that locker room and Kai Kamara and some of the characters that are up there in Colorado, I think somehow it just works. We've also noticed Colorado's had no problem scoring goals this year. Kai Kamara is scoring goals. The problem is the defense has just been giving up 3 goals every time. Now that the defense isn't giving up 3 goals or 4 goals every game, Colorado looks like a competent soccer team we actually sort of thought they were. They were doing the hard part of scoring the goals. They just needed to balance it out with just getting 1 or 2 key stops a game, because both of those stops were usually turning into goals for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's crazy what they've done over there, and it makes the upcoming game on July 4th pretty exciting one to look forward to. Always a packed house in July 4th in Colorado. And I think if you'd asked us a couple months ago, that would be one of those games you circle on the schedule as who the heck wants to watch that. But that has certainly changed recently. But going back to the Revolution, there are 2 games this week. What was your main takeaway, particularly from last night's comeback victory by the Revolution?
You know, this is something that we complained a lot for many years. And this even goes back to Jay Heaps, of having good impact off the bench. We used to always sort of think the New England Revolution, at the very least, we have a lot of very good players. We're going to have a lot of great players. We can get to that part later. I think Carlos Gil is bordering on the great part now. No one would know this, but except New England. But you never see a coherent plan or setup or style related to how the subs come in, what time they come in, etc., etc. Well, Bruce Arena decides, I'm going to stash Teal Bunbury and Christian Pinilla on the bench and kind of bring them in around the hour mark. And whatever that idea was, boy, that worked out really well.
Yeah, and they got away with a lot of rotation in this game, too, that allowed them to do that. I think Bruce Arena mentioned after the last game that they're going to make changes, and I think there were 6 lineup changes. One of them probably doesn't count because it was Matt Turner coming back in from suspension, but the other 5 were obviously for rotation purposes. Fagundes got back in the lineup. DeJuan Jones was back at left back. De La Mea, as I mentioned earlier, made a rare start in this one. But yeah, no, it was impressive what they did with the substitutions in this game. I think a lot of the complaints this season, well, one of the complaints this season of many about Brad Friedel was causes weird choices with substitutions. But Bruce Arena in this one was quick to pull the trigger, even after the Revolution tied it up with De La Mea to get more offensive, bringing on Bunbury and Pania. But what were your thoughts on the guys that actually did start that kind of needed those subs to spark the team to life, with Fagundez going 56 minutes and Rennicks going 60 minutes before getting subbed off?
Rennicks in particular, kind of disappointed. There wasn't a whole lot of the strikers getting the ball, but Rennicks in particular seemed like he was someone who was struggling to sort of enter the game in any meaningful way. And I think him coming off in particular for Pania was a game changer. Not that Rennicks did anything bad. It's just in a diamond formation, which is something I don't love New England doing, I feel like they're almost wasting a striker because they just don't get the ball that forward into the middle that often. So it feels strange to sort of divide the touches between two strikers that aren't going to get that many touches anyway. So that when you have Pania and Bunbury come on and maybe the formation tweaks a little bit, now everything opens up. Now Pania on fresh legs is creating space. Teal up front is now, as he usually does, crashing the back post and causing trouble because, let's face it, Teal's really good at doing all those things. And that's why sometimes bringing Teal off the bench is sometimes awesome, because now you have someone with that experience and with that level of skill who can play two ways, mostly as an attacker, mostly as a defender. I think Teal Bunbury is a box-to-box sub. To hold a lead is perfectly acceptable. I've been saying this for a while now. But yeah, it just seemed like this was something where, you actually had a game change on the fact that you got a goal right before you made the sub. You bring on the subs. Now you're dominating the game, and it's just a matter of time as to when the second goal happens. Maybe you're not expecting it to be as dramatic as a stoppage time winner, but you could see the build-up to New England working their way towards taking that lead.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rennicks, and I think one of the plays early on where that one shot that he had was a fantastic setup by Carles Gil to kind of play the ball over the back line, and Rennicks was in a good position where he got behind his defender and tried to volley it. It was a tough shot, to be fair, but he sent it well high of the net, and that's one, as he gets... he's still only 20 years old. As he gets older, you'd hope to see him do a little bit better with that chance. But I agree. I don't think it was the best showing from Rennicks, but it was good that the Revolution, managed to get him 60 minutes and get him a start. And the other thing that didn't do him any favors was I don't think he connected very well with Caicedo, and that was more Caicedo's fault. In particular, there was that chance early that we were talking about earlier where Rennicks was making a run into the box and was open, and Caicedo had really what should have been an easy pass to Rennicks that he just completely botched. And I think it went out for a goal kick. So there were some disappointing moments between the two of them, and I don't think they particularly combined very well up top until some of those substitutions were made.
Right, and I think that's sort of the other issue for New England is we're not really a team that's ever really used two strikers. So as far as building a partnership, it's usually we talk about the partnership of the midfield, not so much the partnership in attack. And this is something that Bruce Arena's, I think one of his biggest goals is finding that balance, whether that balance is another striker in the summer window or finding a balance of, do we use, Buchanan and Caicedo? Is it Bunbury and Caicedo? And then someone comes in off the bench, like finding whatever the balance is and also not making it predictable. I think, being able to withhold, Pania and Bunbury is pretty devastating, options off the bench. I don't necessarily think that Diego's a great person to come off the bench, but maybe there's days where you're going to want him, on reserve for a certain matchup. And I think that you're going to see Arena do that more, of sort of tweaking week to week. I want to try to tack down this side. I want to overload this combination on that flank and little things like that. And I think you're going to see a lot of results like this where, maybe it's not a great game all around. Maybe the subs don't affect the game. Maybe they actually change the game for the better. But you're going to see a lot of tinkering, I think, in the interim. And if you're going to have results like this, I think that's perfectly way to close out the rest of the year. You don't really need to get results if you're New England. Certainly it helps to try and claw your way back into the playoff race, but I'm still not sure that should be a goal for New England this year.
Yeah, and I'm going to switch sides to my takeaway, which is more on the defensive end, and perhaps a bit more negative, given the Revolution came out of this week with 4 points, so it was overall a good week for them. The only thing I'll point out there is something that Brad Feldman pointed out during the broadcast, and that's Houston in particular. Without Ellis in their lineup is a terrible team. They've lost 8 straight games after this one without Ellis in their lineup. So I think with that in mind, this was kind of a must-win for the Revolution against Houston if they were to kind of maintain their chances of making the playoffs. But again, with that in mind, Houston's not a team that's very good offensively when they're missing Ellis. So I don't know how much credit you can give to the defense for holding them to 1 goal. And same with Philadelphia, who was missing several players on Wednesday. I think the defensive results so far have been better than the defensive talent. And we talked a bit about it before we started recording. But one combination that hasn't impressed me that I think the Revolution need to figure out is that right center back, right back combination. I think Brandon Bye just hasn't been good enough these past 2 games. A lot of that's masked by the fact he scored the Revolution's only goal on Wednesday. But in this game, there were so many times where Kyoto just got the better of him. A lot of those times, Brandon Bye was actually in a good position and just got caught flat-footed or didn't react quickly enough. He actually had a few steps on Kyoto. There was a chance in, I think, the 57th minute that Kyoto almost scored on, perhaps should have scored on, or Brandon Bye was about 3 yards closer to the Revolution goal than Kyoto was. There was a long pass from Houston. Andrew Frowell misplayed it. At this point, Brandon Bye didn't start to run backwards. Kyoto did. He got past Brandon Bye instantly. Brandon Bye was then playing catch up. And that type of play just happens too often. And then to top it off, the fact that Brandon Bye, on a night where the Revolution passed pretty well, Brandon Bye passed at 46.2%, which was down from 62.5% on Wednesday, which also isn't very good. There's a lot of things I like about Brandon Bye, and I think he can add a lot to the attack, and I think he's looked better in the times where he's played midfield. But I just don't think he can be your everyday right back in this league, and I don't think that him and Farrell cover for each other particularly well when Farrell's the right center back and Brandon Bye is at right back. And it didn't get completely exposed in the score sheet these past 2 games, but I think that's something when the Revolution face teams that are at full strength and have higher powered offense, that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, again, we have to remember that, this was a game in which Julio Leonibaba was available off the bench, and he came in for a token 1-minute appearance. I forget who he subbed off for in the end, but
it was Carles Gil, actually.
It was Carles Gil, yeah. So I mean, something like that is fine. Like if Julio Leonibaba should not be starting 20 whatever games a year for New England. He's a great spot starter. He's a great substitute. I love Julio Leonibaba. I love it when he blocks a shot and celebrates, even when the play is going on. You probably shouldn't do that, but I don't care. I love that stuff. But if you're going to still have Michael Mancien unavailable on the roster or out injured or whatever the issue is, and you're still needing to play Andrew Farrell at center back at the halfway point of the year, if center back is not your first priority when the transfer window opens, then I don't know what is. Because you might have solved the left back spot accidentally with DeJuan Jones jumping into there really, really well. The right side of your line is killing you because you've got 2 guys playing out of position, and that's a problem. I know blanking now. Delamea came in his first start in I think 2 months, and he gets a goal. That's great for him. A lovely story about his uncle who passed away during the week, and the goal being dedicated to him. And I still think Delamea is one of the best passers and distributors out of that back line, and it's not even close compared to what you're looking at with 2 rookie type fullbacks and Andrew Farrell, another fullback playing at center back. And I just feel like the Revs back line is still just unbalanced, and we need to get Andrew Farrell quickly over to the right side. He's just a far better option at that position than Brandon Bye is. Both on both sides of the ball. We can debate whether or not positional. I'm sure Andrew Farrell makes very similar mistakes, but he also recognizes them, I think, a lot faster, and he's been a defender a lot longer than Brandon Bye has. And there are just games like this week where you go, Brandon Bye is certainly a solid option, but he cannot be a consistent starter if he's going to have games routinely like that.
Yeah, I've honestly been more impressed with Brandon Bye the few times we've seen him in midfield than I have at right back. I don't think he is, as a depth piece, I don't have a problem with seeing him get minutes as a depth piece, but I think if he's your everyday right back, you're in trouble. And I also think there's no way you can convince me that, for as much effort as Andrew Farrell puts in, as much credit as he deserves for filling at center back, that he is a better center back than De La Mea, particularly in Bruce Arena's system. I've said on this show before, I think De La Mea is not the best emergency defender. And under Brad Friedel, that was something that your center backs had to do a lot. Andy Baba, obviously a very good emergency defender. Farrell, if only for his physicality and his ability to track back, a very good emergency defender. I think De La Mea, when you're actually playing soccer and trying to keep possession and trying to generate offense and not just playing on the back foot and turnovers and errors and trying to recover, I think he's probably the best center back on this roster. And again, you can't convince me that Andrew Farrell is a better center back than De La Mea, and you also can't convince me that Brandon Bai is a better right back than Andrew Farrell. With De La Mea regaining fitness, I'm hopeful that we might see more of him at center back and more of Farrell at right back and more of Brandon Bai as a good option off the bench when you need some offense or some sort of spark.
Yeah, I would like to see it. Again, there's still the impending, we assume, summer additions and where those positions might be. I think center back would have to be one. I think at this point, you can maybe go through the rest of the year with Jones at left back. I think there's nothing wrong with saying he's earned a shot to try and do that for the rest of the year and sort of determine whether or not he's going to be an option as a starter next year, or maybe he's just an option off the bench and he can be sort of that utility, sort of just left-sided player, as it were. You need a midfielder, you got DeJuan Jones. You need a left back, you got DeJuan Jones sitting on the bench. He's perfectly fine. I still think they need another holding midfielder. I still think there's a combination of, Luis Caicedo or Scotty Caldwell and someone else that can get this team over the top. Who that player might be, I don't know, but I still think that the standard 4-2-3-1 the Revolution have been using is still the best way for their team to set up and build through the middle with Gil and even Caicedo. I think Caicedo was great yesterday in sort of a lone holding role. Got fouled a whole ton of times, if I remember too. So, this is sort of just the beginning of the tinkering process that I think Arena is going to have the next couple of months.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the way they started this game, wasn't the best, and Arena learned from that, and he's had time to kind of, as I mentioned, he rotated the squad a bit, and I think it didn't work out so much in the first half, but found a way to change it in the second half. The defense, to me, as you mentioned, is certainly an area of concern as they go into the transfer window. And we'll talk a bit more about that during listener questions, because I think a few people asked about that one. But just as you're talking there, I just happened to notice on Twitter, because we mentioned Michael Mancian, that Jeff Lemieux says he's still not back in full training and he's been working off to the side with athletic trainers. So I was going to ask you if Michael Mancian was the new Somi now that Somi's off the roster, but it sounds like he is actually still injured and working his way back to fitness. So I'm very curious to see how Bruce Arena rates Michael Mancian, because apparently we actually still don't know if he's not 100% or not even in full training at this point, which is kind of surprising to me.
It is surprising because normally the team would be putting out more of an update than something from Jeff Lemieux. And I love Jeff, but I don't love when he has to be the mouthpiece of information every time. And
it's just him replying to somebody's tweet too. It's not even putting it out there.
And like I said, it meant, if the second highest paid player in your team is out for almost 2 months, you'd almost want to wonder why. And I'm sure, I think it's been unlisted as like a plantar fasciitis injury, which is, basically a bruised foot. And that sucks. I think I've had it once. And it's obviously not something you can really play soccer with effectively. And I get that, but that'd be something that you'd want to, let everyone know, like, hey, we're still dealing with this. And if you knew that a couple months ago before the training window, before the spring window was going to close, and you knew that this might be a 2-month injury and a replacement wasn't brought in, I find that to be a problem. And if you're not going to address it, in the first window, you absolutely have to address it in the second window.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. And it's weird that more hasn't been made out of it, other than a couple of tweets like that. Because Michael Mancian, like you said, was the captain of this team at one point, and obviously the second highest paid player on the roster, and a lot has been expected out of him. But it is interesting that they, are saying he's still too injured to participate fully in training. So maybe we'll see more minutes for him when Bruce Arena actually gets a chance to see him in full training. I guess that'll be something to watch as well. But at this point, I think we've seen enough of him to know that the Revolution do need help back there. But before we jump to listener questions, did you have any other thoughts on this game you wanted to discuss?
No, we sort of talked a little bit, pre-show. I think you would have preferred to win both of these games. I don't necessarily. Obviously, you want to beat Philadelphia because it's an Eastern Conference opponent. But in the grand scheme of things, 4 points in a multi-game week at home for where this New England team was, 2 months ago, is pretty impressive. And the fact that you're within the proverbial striking distance of Toronto for a playoff spot. Please do not look at the Revolution goal difference number. That tiebreaker is terrible and is dwarfed only by the abysmally high goal differential for FC Cincinnati, or low, depending on how you want to look at the number. I still don't think New England is a playoff threat, but the fact that you actually are looking at the Eastern Conference and going, listen, I don't think anyone's out of it yet, besides Cincinnati, is not necessarily a bad thing. The way that things go, obviously, Columbus could be doing a little bit better. Chicago, God knows what Chicago is. Orlando, I think, is decent. I think the teams that are above the red line in the East now are probably the teams that will be there in some order. Yeah. But it's still not impossible to say that Orlando or New England couldn't jump someone in the next couple of months.
Yeah, listen, when you look at the standings at this point, the Revolution obviously only 3 points out of the playoffs. And there's no games in hand or anything for Toronto when you look at that. But the concern for me, if I'm a Revolution fan trying to figure out how the Revolution are going to make the playoffs, and you're happy that they're only a few points back at this point, but you look at who's above them. There's obviously the teams at the top: Philadelphia, DC, Montreal. I think Philadelphia and Montreal are playing above their rosters, but those teams are 10 plus points ahead of the Revolution. So, how realistic is it that the Revolution can catch those teams? I'm not sure it's that realistic. And Piatti, when he's back healthy, makes Montreal a different team.
Yeah, you have to. The one team that I would say, listen, if you're going to catch someone, it's going to be Montreal. But Montreal is doing this right now without Piatti. And
exactly.
when he comes back, yes, you're 10 games behind them with 2 games in hand. And yes, Montreal has a equally not great goal differential. But that would be the one team where if you're looking at a team where you're going to jump up and try and catch someone, you need someone to drop back to the pack a lot. I think Montreal is that team, particularly longer Piatti is out. Toronto, I'd like to think at some point Toronto's going to get their act together. Toronto right now just defensively is just kind of a mess, which is sort of a strange thing to say because normally they're, it's sort of a solid thing where they stop scoring for a little while and that's why they're terrible. But yeah, I look at the East and just go, I think there are some good teams there that are above the red line. I don't really know if there's any great teams. And that includes, I think maybe DC might be that one team where they'll just always be near the top, but I don't know if DC is a great team.
Well, the one thing people are quick to forget too is New York City FC hasn't lost a game since March. They've had one loss all season.
They've also only won
they have
6
wins, and they have 6 wins, but they also have 3 games in hand on the Revolution. Yeah. But when I'm looking at the standings and I'm thinking playoffs, I see Atlanta United, who's in 4th place. I don't think the Revolution can catch them. I know they're with the coaching change, they haven't been as good this year, but they seem to sort of start to figure it out lately. I really don't see them as catchable. You look at the New York Red Bulls, who maybe haven't been as good this year as they were last year, but at 7 points ahead of the Revolution, and I think they're kind of sort of starting to figure things out. Bradley Wright Phillips is coming back from injury. I don't think they're catchable. New York City FC, you mentioned the lack of wins. They still lead the East in points per game. I don't think they're catchable. So to me, I come down to the same 2 teams as you, Toronto, because they're 3 points ahead of the Revolution and they've still struggled this year. I think the best shot for the Revolution is that somehow Toronto still doesn't figure it out. Obviously, they're without Bradley and Altidore during the Gold Cup, so there's a chance to make up some ground there. But they had lots of talent on that team last year and couldn't figure it out. So maybe, just maybe, again this year they don't figure it out, and that's the team the Revolution can catch. Other than that, I do think the weakest link is Montreal, despite the fact that they're in 3rd place. But 10 points is a tall task for any team.
Montreal started off so well, and it is something, I don't know if we said it specifically here, but I always have the mindset of you cannot win a championship in March, but you can damn well lose one. And it's very easy to say New England the first 2 months of the year lost their shot at a title or even a playoff spot because of how bad they were. Even if we don't perceive New England to be as bad as whatever, how many points per game Cincinnati has, New England was in that realm. And they're still, around, I think they just broke 1 point a game with the win over Houston. I think they can get up to, I'm looking at some of the math the rest of the way. If they get like 1.5 points per game, they get up to about 45 points. And I don't think that made the playoffs last year. So, could New England get up into the mid to low 40s for the overall standings? Sure. Is that enough to get them into the playoffs? Maybe. But at best, you'd be the 7th seed, which means you're probably going to have to go to DC or Atlanta, who's probably going to smoke you in the first round. So,
yeah, no, that's my thought exactly. The best the Revolution can hope for is 7th place, and I don't even think that's that realistic. Just looking at the teams that are above them, and then if you get 7th place, anything can happen in a 1-game playoff. But getting 7th place and going on the road against a team like DC United or Atlanta or, even the Red Bulls or New York City FC, the Revolution are going to be huge underdogs in that. Mm-hmm. So it would be an accomplishment for them to get 7th place, and certainly that would look good on Bruce Arena. But even with all the good feelings of this week, I think people shouldn't get too far ahead of themselves and suddenly thinking this team can actually do something in the playoffs, even if they do make it. Not to be a downer, but
no, but I mean, it's just realistic. This would actually be a team that I think would be far better in that first round, that 1-game winner go home scenario, than they would be over a 2-legged series. I think in a 2-legged series, the better team is going to win most of the time. In a 1-legged match, anything can sort of happen. We saw kind of a meh Columbus team take out Atlanta a couple of years ago, and we thought, whoa, maybe Atlanta's not ready. And then Atlanta won the whole thing the next year. So, I think this would be a team where we are much better equipped now to stun someone in the first round than we are to make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think my hopes for what this team could do would be a bit more heightened if it wasn't for Bruce Arena constantly kind of trying to temper hopes as far as what the Revolution are going to do in the summer window, where he keeps saying they're going to sign 1 or 2 players, if any. So that I think also needs to kind of temper your excitement until the Revolution show they actually are going to sign somebody. Because I do think if they, and again, I don't want to get into who they should sign yet because we're going to do that later. But I do think if they signed the right 2 players, they could be a team that could get that 7th seed, could be a team that could pull off an upset. If they go through the summer window and sign nobody, I don't think they're going to be a team that really gets that 7th seed. And if they do, I would not feel very confident at all in their ability to, even pull off a shock in a 1 game. But, again, summer window is just opening. We're going to see what the Revolution can do. There's time there, but Bruce Arena has been very much the opposite of Brad Friedel and Mike Burns, and that he's kind of tempered excitement for what the Revolution are going to do. There's no more talk of signing a big DP or anything like that. It's they might sign 1 or 2 players, if any. So I think that too kind of leads to me not being the most confident in their ability to actually do something, come the postseason.
Well, I know I've said along similar lines that Major League Soccer is the literal whose line is it anyway. Listen, the games don't make sense, and the points at the end of the day really don't matter because every week none of this stupid league makes any sense. And in a 1-game scenario, that's completely true. But over 34 games or over a 2-legged series, you would like to think maybe even only 90% of the time that yes, the better team wins. And some of the results that we've seen, Colorado beating LAFC 1-0. Minnesota putting a touchdown up on FC Cincinnati, who's just nosedive this year. Week to week, you can never predict anything, but, eventually you expect the top of the league in the top of each conference to rise to the top, and New England's not there yet to challenge for that.
And I do have one last question for you on the game Saturday. The one refereeing controversy that kept coming up in this game was the delay in putting up the flag for the offside. Bruce Arena was furious over it. Paul Mariner, if you're listening to the broadcast, was furious over it. There was 1 or 2 times where a Revolution player got the ball and was clearly offside, and the flag went up 3 or 4 seconds later for some unknown reason. I don't know if you were paying much attention to the delayed offside flag that seemed to be causing a lot of annoyance out of Bruce Arena. But did you have any thoughts on what was happening in the game Saturday? Because I couldn't get it.
No, what happens is that there's so many damn iterations of this offside law, my head goes spinning sometimes. This particular one of waiting for the other team's guy to like play the ball is probably the one that I hate the most, because we all know who's going to get the ball. We all know who's 5 yards offside. We don't need to wait for him to be in possession and make a move towards goal. Just put the damn flag up. You're not in the end. Does it save anything other than 5 or 10 seconds? No, it doesn't. But the goalkeeper should not be put into a situation where he thinks this guy's offsides by 5 miles, right? And it has to be prepared, and you put a meaningless shot on target, but the goalkeeper rolls his ankle or something. Now it's not a meaningless shot. Now your flag is laid and someone got hurt, and that's on you. And that shouldn't happen. If you're offside and there's no chance of advantage or someone else getting to the ball, the flag should go up, and there shouldn't be a delay. That should be a common sense thing. But at the highest levels of FIFA, they say, no, you got to wait for the guy to touch the ball. I don't like that rule. I probably break that rule on a regular basis when I'm on the sideline in my local youth or adult league games, and no one really puts up much of a fuss besides, we're really supposed to touch it, right? And I says, listen, I'm not chasing 30 yards after you. I'm staying right here, and the flag's going up.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you on that one. And last night in particular, I understand the frustration from Bruce Arena, because it was a few that were just bizarre to me. But you're right. That's where one of these times the flag's not going to go up and somebody's going to get hurt from it, and you just envision that happening. And I don't really get it. But with that, we have a lot of listener questions, so let's jump into them. The first one was from Barbara S., who wanted to know, how do you think the younger players did, and why aren't we seeing Buchanan? I know we talked a little bit about Jones and Rennicks earlier, but overall, how do you think they did in this game, and why aren't we seeing more Buchanan?
I would like to see a little bit more of Buchanan off the bench. Obviously, it's sort of hard to remember. You're fighting with minutes for Pania, Bunbury, Fagundes, Juan Agudelo. These are guys who are establishing, guys who are going to get minutes. So really, you're sort of fighting for minutes off the bench when those guys either don't go on, or maybe there's a situation where we want Buchanan up top instead of maybe JF Caicedo. I don't think either of the strikers, Rennicks or Caicedo, particularly the starting strikers, particularly did anything outstanding. Obviously, Pania and Bunbury is fresh legs against tired legs, worked out really, really well. And I hope that maybe you could see, Rennicks or Buchanan have that sort of impact, where maybe they're the guys who are coming off the bench and having that kind of impact late in the game. I think it's nice that Rennicks is getting minutes. I think he had a pretty solid under-20 World Cup with the U.S. Team there, making, I think it was the quarterfinals, and he scored a really good winner, poacher's goal to beat France in that. So, I think you're definitely going to see a lot more of Rennicks now that he's back and not preparing for the under-20 World Cup. And I hope we do get to see a little bit more of Buchanan coming off the bench, because I'm really excited to see him and Jones and Rennicks. This is sort of the best draft class, I use that phrase loosely, crop of incoming players I think that we've really had since probably the year we signed Scotty Caldwell and then drafted, it might have been Farrell we drafted the same year, where you had so many young players immediately jumping into the squad right away. And it's nice to have 2 or 3 or 4 guys who are rookies, having an impact.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my thought, the first thing I thought when I was reading this question was like, was Buchanan hurt? Because he wasn't in the 18 in this game. And I kind of understand why. But when you have DeJuan Jones playing left back, to me, that makes even more sense to have Buchanan on the bench as an option to get off the bench and add his pace. And I've liked what we've seen from Buchanan in short minutes, so I am surprised we haven't seen more of him.
Yeah.
This definitely seems like a game to me where he should have been in the 18. Things worked with Pania and Bunbury, but if you wanted to make that third sub to add more pace, you'd look to a guy like Buchanan. I'm not sure who else on the bench would have been that guy at that point. I don't think there was someone on the bench.
You probably would have been looking at putting either Zahibo or Caldwell.
Yeah.
Or pushing Jones farther up and going to a 3-man back line. There are still options, but yeah, it seems sort of strange to me. Like you're only playing with one center holding midfielder, but you had both of them on the bench. So I don't know if there was a backup plan to go to a 2-man holding midfield. Based on the subs, that would probably look the case. But it would have been nice to have one more pure attacker on the bench, and Buchanan certainly would have been on that list.
Yeah, because I get it if Castillo is your left back and you prefer Jones because of his versatility, because he can play as that kind of role or as the left back. Then maybe it's redundant to have Buchanan as well. But in this game, it is surprising that Buchanan wasn't on the bench, because I do think he's been good in his limited minutes. So hopefully we'll see more of him going forward. Obviously Jones is a little bit older, so Buchanan has more time to develop. But again, we've hit on this a lot. If the Revolution don't have a USL team and he's not getting minutes there, it's tough for his development to not be an 18.
If you're not going to loan these guys down and let them play minutes in either Birmingham or Hartford or RIP Rochester, you want them getting minutes somewhere. If it's not with the first team, it should be somewhere else. And particularly for Buchanan, because I think we need to find a niche position for him. Like, I'm not sure what type of an attacker Justin Rennicks is, but I do know he's good at soccer. I think Buchanan needs to figure out what his best role is. Is he a striker? Is he kind of a two-way player? Is he a winger? I think we need to figure out, based on the game minutes that he's getting, where and what he excels at, so that when there is a matchup that the coaching staff likes, we can go, Tajon, get over here. You see that? Go exploit that gap, or go exploit that matchup. Go piss that guy off and steal the ball from him and harass him and everything else. That's something where I think he can be a great player like that, almost like Teal Bunbury is sort of right now. I feel like somehow the comparison for me, like, Tajon sort of like Teal, like, a little bit lower on the pecking order, but still, like, that's the type of impact where it's like, I need a guy who needs to harass someone to help the defense. Tajon can do that. Little roles that he can do, find out where he excels at.
Yeah, agreed there. And the next question we got was from Eddie, and he wants to know if Edgar Castillo is done forever as a Revs player at this point.
I think he's done forever, but I mean, it would not shock me if the rest of the way, DeJuan Jones starts a dozen games to Edgar Castillo 6. If Edgar Castillo, DeJuan Jones at some point, we always talk about like the rookie wall. These are, guys in the college game, they don't play nearly as many games as they should, because the college season is only in the NCAA for the fall. So now you've been training and playing every week, and I know sometimes in the NCAA you're playing 2 games in a row and things like that, but at some point I think DeJuan Jones is going to need a break, and I think Edgar Castillo is the guy. You traded a lot to get him. You still have to play him at some point. He can't just be stashed away and cut outright like one Gabriel Somi was not too long ago.
Yeah, you're right. The rookie wall is absolutely a thing, and the Revolution still, for the next month at least, have a pretty busy schedule. So I do think we haven't seen the end of Edgar Castillo. What I will say about Edgar Castillo is when that trade was made at the time, I thought it was a good move. Since then, and since then, Edgar Castillo has been extremely disappointing, and I feel like I got a bit of egg on my face for my takes on that move when it first happened. It's just really disappointing, because you look at Edgar Castillo last year, and he was the Colorado Rapids' best player. To be fair, he played more as a wingback than as a fullback. That might have had something to do with it.
I think he was also the Revs' best player in the first month of the year.
I think offensively he was doing a lot, but I think defensively there was always a weakness there, one-on-one defending. And, as the season went on, the offensive contribution kind of disappeared a little bit or dipped down, and the defensive contribution that was poor, I think, all season, became much more apparent when he wasn't making up for it on the other side of the ball. I don't know if age has caught up to him or what. I don't think he was ever the best defensive left back, but he was certainly a serviceable one. But to me,
if we can turn Chris Tierney into a almost damn near all-star left back, there's no reason why Edgar Castillo should be struggling this badly.
Yeah, exactly. And I was willing to put some of that blame on Brad Friedel and the system that he was using, but I don't think Castillo's looked much better under Bruce Arena or Mike Lapper either. So to me, the biggest disappointment player-wise for the Revolution this season has been Edgar Castillo. But with that said, I think, like you were saying, the Revolution still have a busy schedule, and there'll be more minutes for him down the road. But absolutely, this trade hasn't worked out well for the Revolution. And the next question we got was kind of taking a hit at Brad Friedel and Mike Burns. This was James Downey. He wants to know, what do Brad Friedel and Mike Burns think about Somi getting let go and this team going 6 straight without a loss as they sit on the couch together, unemployed, unshaven, drinking beer, and watching weekday television?
First of all, weekday television is not nearly as fun as I remember it. And I've been home a lot more. I work the evenings now, so I'm not asleep during the day like I used to be. God, you know what? I still feel bad for Mike Burns, and we talked about the after firing special. You should have sacked them all at the same time. Mike Burns didn't need to have that 7-minute press conference. I don't have a ton of sympathy for either of them. But I think when you look at what New England might be poised now to do, I think Mike Burns might be sitting to himself wondering, if I had asked to replace, Jermaine Jones with anyone of reasonable considered talent, I might still have a job. And I don't think he ever asked that question. And I think that's the bed that he made, and he should lie in it. And, well, we already know the bed that Brad Friedel made. We're going to be referencing it for quite some time, I think, as Bruce Arena makes that bed and then puts $1 million sheets on it or something like that and sleeps like a baby every night.
Knowing the smugness of Mike Burns, I can only imagine him sitting back and watching the Revolution right now and saying, I put that roster together, and see, now they're playing well. It wasn't that bad of a roster. Everyone blamed me, and now the roster is doing pretty good. 6 games unbeaten. I put that together. That's what I think Mike Burns is doing. As for Brad Friedel,
if he does have that thought, and I don't want to put it past you. You know the man better than I do. I met him once. I would say you also hired the coach that helped coach that roster that you put together, and that didn't go all that well. So I don't think that's a good thing. But if we've said this, if the last thing Mike Burns did was give us this draft class and Carlos Gill, it's not a bad going away present.
No. I mean, there are some pieces there that Mike Burns brought in that the team can build off going forward, but I don't think either of those guys can feel too good about the job that they did here over the past few years. Next question comes from Mike Kennedy, and we touched on this. What positions are the top priority for upgrading this roster in the summer window?
God, you know what? I've been saying pretty much for the last 2 years, I feel like holding midfield has been the position to go DP, and I still believe to go DP, but I might wait and do that in January. I think you have to go out and I would trade for a center back at this point. Go within the league, find someone's either backup or an older starter, and just be like, listen, we need you here for the next 18 months, and then afterwards you can do whatever you want. Next year and a half, we really need you to play 50 or 60 games for us to help stabilize this mess. And in the meantime, draft a center back as well, or find a young center back to develop, so that you have a true fourth center back next to Jaleel who can learn and grow. But yeah, I feel like because we need by getting a center back, I feel like it solves two problems. It solves your center back problem, and it also solves the problem of getting Andrew Farrell back to right back. So for me, that would be the priority. I would make the big DP signings either. For me, it would be center defensive midfield, then striker. I would make those two moves in the winter.
Yeah, I was hoping I could disagree with you, but you said exactly where I was going with that.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add there is in the summer window, if the Revolution are to make 2 signings, I think center back has to be number 1. But I think, and I agree with you that defensive midfielder, if you're going to make a big DP signing, that's where you have the most influence. But I think if you're going to make 2 signings this window, it'd be center back and striker, because I think the team now is finally starting to create chances, but the finishing is still tremendously lacking. Whether it's Caicedo, whether it's Bunbury, whether it's Agudelo, I think the finishing just hasn't been good enough. And I do think that, as we talked about before we started this episode, Carles Gil had 8 key passes in this game. He created a lot of chances for this team.
And I don't believe he had an assist.
No, and I think that's been a big problem with this team lately. We talked earlier in the season, I think the Revolution weren't creating chances, but under Bruce Arena and recently they have been creating chances, and it's been the finishing that's kind of let them down. So right now, if they're going to make the biggest impact this season, I think those would be the 2 moves they would make. But I'm 100% with you that in the offseason, if they can go out there and sign a really influential central midfielder, defensive midfielder to kind of take over this team, that would be the move I would make. So I'm in agreement with you there. The next 2 questions we had are both related to De La Mea. The first one was comment in question: incredible win from the boys. This is from Alex Welsh. Incredible win from the boys. So happy to see Tony get a good performance with all the changes that Bruce will be sure to make in the summer and subsequent off season. Do you think this will be De La Mea's last season with the club? And then the other question we got was from Muhammad Hussein, who wants to know, did Tony earn another start?
I think Tony absolutely earned. I think we said earlier. I still think Tony Delamea is the best center back on this roster. I think as a balance of a pure defender and distributor out of the back, I think he's incredibly solid. I think what he needs is a big partner who can go and handle more of the physical aspects. I think Tony is someone who's the release valve out of the back, getting the ball either to the holding midfielders or up to the midfielders, I think is great. I think he commands the back line very well. I think he's a tremendous leader. All of those little things I think he does well. Maybe not as great in the air, maybe not the big physical presence you want, but he is a good defender. We need to find him a good partner, which is currently not on this roster, to assist him in the things that he's maybe not as great at and complete the back line as a unit, which this has not been a back line unit in some time, I feel like, because half the time we keep putting Andrew Farrell back into the center back position, and every time that happens, I cry a little bit. But I think if Anthony Delamea is your second center back, and you have another center back that is somewhere in the, I don't want to say the Mancienne salary range because it implies that he deserves that salary range at this point, which is debatable, but somewhere in that upper TAM echelon of moves, and that's your back line of Jones, another center back, Delamea, and Farrell. I'm like, that doesn't seem bad on paper. And we said that when Mancienne was signed, and that hasn't panned out. And obviously the injury doesn't help that, but at some point New England needs to hit on replacing the center backs that they had a few years ago. Took you 5 years to replace AJ Soares. I think you eventually did that. That's Delamea. You now need to find a replacement that has the impact that Jose Gonçalves had. And that's, again, not easy. But those are the types of signings that they need to hit on, and New England has struggled with this. So you have an international signing, it can't miss. And too often the international signings the Revolution have are either misses or infield singles or singles. They're not the big impacts that the rest of the league has and this team needs.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that on the question of whether this will be his last season with the club, I think that if you were to ask me right now, the answer would be yes. But I do think, like you said, he's earned more starts, and there's an opportunity there for him to play well enough to earn more time here. Mm-hmm. But all things considered, he's taken up $400K in salary. I think if Bruce Arena is a guy, particularly on defense, where he's going to want to bring in his own guys in the offseason. So if you ask me right now, I'd say, yeah, it's his last season, but I do think there'll be a chance for him to play more and earn another opportunity to come back here. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then another guy that we got asked about from Mike Kennedy is Diego on his way out? He seemed disinterested much of the match.
I mean, Diego's another one of those players where, like Justin Rennicks, I still don't know what his best role is with this team. Last year he did so well in the holding midfield, or in the attacking midfield spot, and we moved him back out to winger or odd striker, and he's not bad at that. But I feel like too often he just doesn't get enough touches to influence the game, and he needs the ball. Diego's someone who needs the ball. He needs to be one-on-one. He needs to beat people. He needs to create off of what he does with the ball. He's not someone who's really going to do things off the ball that's going to make you go like, oh my God, Diego's amazing. I don't know what to do with Diego anymore. I mean, if he's still here next year, he's going to be an asset to the team because he's good. If you're going to sell him, you should have done that last year. When he was coming off of, I think it was a 10-goal, 10-assist type of a year. Like, that's when you wanted to sell him. If you're going to use him, I think you got to start him. I just don't know where you start him in a lineup. I don't think he makes a great central midfielder next to Gill. I think that means you're going to push him out wide. I wouldn't mind if he sort of did that weird Agudelo role where it's like, listen, I'm going to be the second striker and just wander everywhere. And let Agudelo play as a number 8 next to Gill and sort of figure out those combinations. I think when you start Fagundes as like a outside midfielder, that's sort of his least effective position.
Yeah, and I think when you do start him as an outside midfielder, he's better on the left, which is Panilla's best position, right. And we talked about that before, which is the other problem. That's my issue with Diego. There's no doubt in my mind he's a very talented soccer player. We've seen it. I'm just not sure where his best position is, and I'm not sure where he fits in the Revolution system and Bruce Arena's system. I agree with you that kind of as that second striker, if he had to run out there, that might work. But then maybe he's getting in Carles Gil's way. That's the tough part. He needs touches to be an effective player. You're 100% right on that. So it's hard to say, and I also agree with you that his value is high, or at least higher as of the end of last season than it will be after this season. So I don't know what the Revolution do with Diego. I think he's got one more option year next year, and I assume they pick it up and either trade him or keep him. So I don't think he's going to be going anywhere for free, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Davis the Billion also mentioned Diego and thought Diego had a bad attitude for getting subbed. He had a couple other comments as well that talked about De La Mea getting the goal after his uncle passed away. And Matt Turner made great saves, but inconsistent. Pania was a good super sub. And then asked, is Bruce Arena a genius with man management? The one thing I want to say quickly on the Diego comment is, I feel two different ways when I see a player get angry about being subbed. I think it's good that a player wants to stay on the field. But yeah, I think they do need to be more understanding and not impact the other players and the team in that situation. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
No, I mean, I think there's a difference between getting subbed out at the hour mark and being mad about it than, say, Edgar Castillo getting yanked at the 30-minute mark because he was bad and being upset about it. Like, if you're having a bad game and you got to get yanked, you're going to get yanked. Like, it's going to happen. It's not the end of the world. Starting pitchers get yanked. They got to go out and do it a week later. That should be the attitude that you have. That's the way that I normally view it. Being upset as a player who gets substituted, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing as long as it gets settled after the game or the first day in training. Like, hey, we really don't want to see that, but, be motivated by it. I think the issue that I had specifically for Diego Fagundes in this game was if you're deploying a diamond midfield and he's one of those central midfielders and you want to use him as like a shuttler passer with Agudelo, I sort of felt like that was an odd combination. I would have much rather have seen Scott Caldwell in that role. And then now you've got your two holding midfielders already on the field, one holding midfielder on the bench, and then you've got Fagundes, Teal, and Pania off the bench. And that already there just solves a whole bunch of our problems that we were talking about earlier with where's Tejan Buchanan or the extra attacker on the bench. So I think Diego, we're still sort of figuring out roles that he can and can't do. And for a guy who's been in the league for almost a decade, that feels very strange to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on all of that. And the other question here was, is Bruce Arena a genius with man management? What's your thoughts on that one?
I mean, he's not a genius. He's definitely not. He's definitely proven every little button that he pushes right now seems to work with this team. And I think it was very, very smart of the Crafts and/or Brian Bolello to make the decision to bring in Bruce and sack everyone right before the Gold Cup break, because it basically gave Bruce, I think, a very key second little mini preseason to figure out what he had. And those couple of weeks, he can look at this roster and just go, you know what? I don't think this sucks. It's not great. We're going to do a lot of improvements, but it doesn't suck. And the ability to very quickly turn it around with Mike Lapper now into Bruce Arena and just go, listen, we have a roster that we know that should be able to compete week in and week out. Maybe not win all the time, but at the very least compete and not lose by 5 goals. And the fact that Bruce has come in very quickly and established, his style and his rotations, and it's been seemingly received well in the locker room, and we've seen the results on the field. I think that this is exactly what New England needed on the field, and I think as the off seasons and years build up with Bruce and the back office working together, you're going to see what he can do with his roster building talents as well.
And you kind of touched on it, but another question we got was from Joe about Bruce Arena, and he asked, now that the Revolution are back in the hunt, how does Arena balance competing, rotation, and analyzing the whole roster?
I wouldn't change anything. Whatever he's doing right now, I don't think you should look at the standings for the rest of the year. If you sneak into the playoffs, great. I would just be building everything to next year. Don't look at the standings. Don't think about the playoffs. There are larger goals New England has to fix. Sneaking into the playoffs this year should not be one of those goals. I think if it happens, you take it, you get the extra game, you have fun with it, go nuts. But I think right now Bruce Arena should be spending most of his time building for 2020 and figuring out exactly who's staying, who's going, where I need to spend, where I need to maybe find a couple of value veterans from the league to fill out the roster. Maybe you find another holding midfield type and you cut bait with a Zahibo or a Caicedo and both, and figure out what your balances are with the roster, where you can improve from a value standpoint, where you can improve from just a overall talent standpoint with the big money.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think Bruce Arena's done a decent job of actually, even in a short time, of getting players minutes and kind of when guys haven't been playing well, giving other guys a chance, but also not being too quick to pull the trigger on somebody. So I don't think he needs to change what he's been doing. Whether or not the Revolution are in the hunt, I agree. What he's been doing this season is all about building for next year, because as we talked about before, even if the Revolution make the playoffs, I think realistically their chances aren't great of actually doing anything. And next up, we have a couple questions about striker. Val Damas 94, I think, is trying to get us to buy a new nickname for Caicedo. He says, "Is JF Clunky Sado a good striker? He looks like he doesn't know how to walk, but he can hold the ball so well." I'm not sure that one's gonna stick.
No, I don't.
I like the effort.
I listen. He does run a little funny, doesn't he?
He sure does.
He sure does. Okay, I think one of the things New England has to figure out is how they want to use their strikers. If you're going to use Caicedo as the hold-up guy, then you need to find a partner. To me, that would be an Agudelo, a Teal, or a Diego to work off of him on either side. Let JFC2, Caicedo 2, sit in the middle, cause all the trouble, and let the wings open up and use that speed. Let everyone go nuts. If you're going to use Caicedo as a traditional striker, okay, that still seems like it's a perfectly fine idea. But who are you partnering with? How is the balancing going to work? Do you want him going forward with the ball? How do you get him the ball while he's running at goal so that he can shoot? New England always is great at getting the ball to their striker with its back to goal, 40 yards away, not so much right in top of the box. And that's something that has been a long-standing problem. And I think JF2 could be that guy to maybe solve that problem. But at the same time, I also feel like I'm not sure I want him operating as a lone striker all the time. I feel like he might be someone who's best with a partner up top to work off of, and who that partner is and what side of the field they like to work on is something they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of Juan Caicedo still. Whether or not he's a good striker, there's moments in the game where I'm watching and I'm wondering, what he's actually doing. Where his running is really awkward. He's not fast. He looks like a big physical guy, but to me, I think he goes down too easily at times. I don't think he uses his body as well as he could, but then he does have some good hold-up play. He did a great job on the game-winning goal. I think at that point of the game, I was particularly frustrated and wondering, what he was actually offering to the team, and then he does that. So I don't really know whether or not he's a good striker. I can't make up my mind. Every time I think I'm ready to write him off, I see him do something great that really helps the team out. But I mostly agree with your analysis on him, and I don't like him as a lone striker. But the Revolution usually play with a lone striker, so I'm not really sure what that means.
And it's also like he's been with the team exactly 2 months now.
Yeah, I mean, given the injuries and everything, and he hasn't.
And he hasn't even played 10 games yet. I don't think with the team, has he? Or 10 starts?
Yeah, I feel like he's probably played 10 games, but not 10 starts. I'm trying
not
to
10 starts.
He's got 6 starts and 14 appearances, so 8 sub appearances.
Yeah, I think as that number gets up to 15 starts, or and 30 games played, towards the end of the year, or 20 and 30, whatever the number, however the math works out. I know that the numbers are off. As those numbers go up, 3 goals and 2 assists in 600-ish, 700-ish minutes is pretty good, all things considered, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he can make that happen, I think once we hit 15 starts, I'll be more confident in whatever my opinion of him is.
If at the end of the year he's got 2,000 minutes played and, say, 12 goals, 8 assists, we going to complain that much?
No one would complain at that.
I don't think I'd be complaining about that. It can look as awkward as it wants to be. I don't always need New England to play beautiful soccer. I like it when they do. It looks really fun. I love it when New England's on the break with 4 guys running at the goalkeeper and 2 center backs going, oh, God, this is going to suck. But I don't need them to do that all the time. I don't care if he kicks one in from Rennick's range in the World Cup. I don't care if that's how we score every goal. I just want us to score. I just want us to have moments where we have a good sequence that leads to a good scoring chance. And too often the good sequence never leads to the good scoring chance. We don't get to the part where we shoot the ball, or we do and it goes 50 yards away. If JF Caicedo is going to be a poacher, he's going to be a poacher. I don't care how he poaches. I don't care if he's with a partner up top or by himself. As long as he's getting those chances and as long as he's finding the score sheet consistently, he's going to be on the field, I think.
Yeah, my only thought there is I still want to see more from him as far as finishing goes to prove that he can be that poacher, but I completely agree with you otherwise. On a similar note, Randy LH asked, he stated he loved the fight that the team showed to come back and win, but he also said, I can't help but think it would have been easier with a truly world-class striker. What do you put the odds at that Arena will bring one in this coming window? We touched on that briefly, but what do you think the odds that Arena actually brings a world-class striker in this summer window?
I actually like your analysis that if the number one need right now is center back, regardless if that's a trade or an international signing or what have you, I think if you are looking at this roster and going, you know what, we want to make a playoff push, let's go for it. I think you make the striker signing now, and then you hold your big center midfielder, instead of holding midfield spot for the DM in the winter, and you prepare that signing now. You start figuring out who you want to target for that now. But if there's a striker that you like on the international market and you have a chance to bring him in on like a 2.5-year deal, I don't see why you don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not confident it's going to happen, though. If I were to actually place odds on it happening, I'd say maybe 25%. As far as a world-class striker goes, I think I think if the Revolution were really trying to sign somebody this window, a world-class striker, that they would have needed to start earlier, and that we probably would have heard some sort of mumblings or rumors about it at this point. But I do think that in the offseason that'll be a key priority, and I do think they may sign a striker this summer, but a world-class striker, I think more likely than not that they won't. With that said, that would be key for them, as I've already talked about. And then the last two questions we have both relate to Pania. The first one is from Teal is the greatest of all time. He wants to know if Pania looks fitter, because he thought he looked fitter. I'll take that one quickly. I thought Pania had a really good game off the bench, but when you're coming in the 60th minute, it's hard for me to judge that you're actually fitter. I think you just see him go 90 minutes to tell that. And I do think there were games earlier in the season where he came off the bench and looked really good too. So I don't know if you drew anything from his appearance, but for me, it's very hard to say after 30 minutes if Pania looks fitter.
Yeah, I still think Pania is still best when he's a starter, because I think that he is that effective as a player and that game changing. But if you're able to bring him off the bench consistently and he's this good, I don't have a problem with him sort of rotating in and out, whether that's trading out with Diego or Juan or whoever it is. And like I said, New England, they should be able to rotate plenty of guys over the next, few months. There's no reason not to. Even if you're making a playoff push, the schedule is going to be a little clustered right now coming out of the Gold Cup break. There is no more Open Cup. Sadly, I was kind of bummed there's no more Open Cup for New England. But I think, there's no reason why we can't, over the next couple weeks figure out, hey, do we really want, a TAM winger of Pania's level coming off the bench all the time, or do we really want him starting and playing 75 minutes most weeks? And I think the answer at the end of the day is going to be we really want him starting. If he's able to do that, 3 times a month, he should be doing that.
Yeah, and kind of you touched on it already. The last question we have is from Cameron Young, and he wants to know if Bruce should keep Pania and Teal as super subs or reinsert them back into the starting lineup, and if keeping them as subs, who starts over them? I think you touched on that a bit. The one thing I will say here is that if those two guys are fit, I think they're still your best two options at left wing and at striker. Ideally, I think Teal Bunbury is a super sub, but I don't think the Revolution have someone that's better than him to start unless, Juan Caicedo proves to be that guy. But that, again, if they sign someone in the summer window, I think Teal Bunbury is a fantastic super sub. And you talked about how he can play, be a sub that adds the defense, can be a sub that uses pace to add to the offense. I think that's an ideal role for him. But I also agree with you that Pania is ideally a starter when he's fit. So hopefully we see that going forward. And with all the soccer that is going on in the world right now, do you have any shout outs before we wrap up the show?
I believe we have Jamaica confirmed into the semifinals of the Gold Cup, a 1-0 win over Panama on a pretty unfortunate handball there late. Kids, I want to remind you, if you watch the handball call on Panama, stop jumping in the air with your arms over your head. Nothing good happens in soccer when your arm is above your shoulder. I don't want to keep saying this, yet I keep having to see handballs at all levels of soccer caused by this. USA Curacao starts fairly shortly. I'm trying to find the starting lineup for that. They did announce it.
Zardes is starting, in case you were wondering.
No, 8:30 start time. I love the Gold Cup. I love Curacao in the quarters. I love Haiti in the semifinals.
With Zach Harivu.
USA lineup. Oh God, what is this?
Yeah.
Stefan, Nick Lima, Aaron Long, Tim Ream, Walker Zimmerman, Bradley Pulisic, Boyd, McKinney, Areola, and Zardes. They have Boyd as a central midfielder. I bet that's a 4-4-2.
That's got to be a 4-4-2.
If it's not a 4-4-2, it's some kind of weird 4-2-3-1 with Bradley and McKinney as holding mids and Pulisic in the middle. And God, Gyasi Zardes is going to score another weird goal again today, isn't he?
I mean, just blast it at his head, right?
Yeah, just put it near him. It'll just bounce off of this. My God, Gyasi Zardes scores goals like me, but makes them look so much more cooler than the ways I did them. And I just one time scored a goal while like semi-unconscious, so, you know.
Well, when you talk about the Gold Cup, it's very exciting for Revolution fans to see Zach Harivu making it in the semifinals with Haiti.
2 starts, subbing in late, closing out Canada. I love it. I love it so much.
And of course, we have to mention that the U.S. Women's World Cup team in the semifinals versus England on Tuesday at 3:00. So lots of exciting soccer to watch this week, and it's crazy that we have the African Cup of Nations, Copa America, Gold Cup, Women's World Cup all going on at the same time.
Why do we schedule these things all at the same time? Why don't we spread this out so we can watch more games at once? Who schedules this nonsense? Looking at you, FIFA. You suck at this.
I'm with you, and I had also forgotten the fact that the Confederations Cup was canceled, so that if the U.S. wins the Gold Cup, it doesn't matter as far as qualifying for that, because it doesn't exist anymore. Instead, there's going to be some sort of crazy 24-team Club World Cup.
And the Women's World Cup, I think, on 4 days this week, on top of...
Well, and it was crazy the amount of Copa America games that were starting at 3:00 in the afternoon. Like, why? You're in our time zone. Why are you starting these games at these terrible times? But...
And I can't imagine the weather. I mean, God, I forget who it was. I saw the tweet where it was 100 and whatever degrees in France, Fahrenheit, and it never gets this hot ever in Europe, and it's one of the biggest heat waves in I think it was a decade or something like that. And people looking at every other team and just going oh my God, we never train in this. And meanwhile, the U.S. women are this is NWSL in late May. This is normal. What are you talking about? This is perfectly fine.
That good old Texas heat.
And then you just look at some of the results and how they grind out some of these games, and you just have to wonder where, listen, maybe they're just out conditioning everyone else. They don't even need to worry about, beating everyone 5-0. They can just be we'll just run you into the ground because we play in this every day.
No, I think there's absolutely something to that. And, I mean, it helps that the U.S. has so much talent anyways, but the fitness and being used to that weather, I think, absolutely is an advantage for the U.S.
Because I'm going to be honest, I didn't love the way the U.S. played in either knockout game. I thought Spain was very lively, and the U.S. was lucky to get both those penalties. They were both penalties. And obviously the win against France, holding on there late. But I feel like the U.S. should have put both those games away much, much earlier than they did. They've been doing very well in the set plays, but they need to score more from open play, particularly earlier in the middle of games when they have control, and make that game control show itself on the scoreboard.
Yeah, you need to see some more of Alex Morgan scoring. Haven't seen much of that lately.
I need Alex Morgan to score. She does. She looks like she's playing hurt. I don't know if that's true, but
yeah. Well, because the Gold Cup game's coming up, we should wrap it up. But can you tell people where they can find your Gold Cup coverage and your Revolution coverage, and also
you can find my usually belated 2 p.m. recaps for the Gold Cup at thebentmusket.com, at thebentmusket, and at jcatnice 43. It was a big week in Connecticut sports history. We're going back to the Big East. We're coming for you, Providence. We're coming for you.
And Kemba Walker going to the Celtics. That's exciting news.
Is that official? Did that happen yet?
It's all but official from what they're saying out there, yeah.
I want to remind everyone, the last time you signed someone from the great University of Connecticut Huskies, his name was Ray Allen, and anything is possible. Just saying.
This is one of the few times where I'll consider Connecticut part of New England, but don't get used to it. Right. And you can follow me at Sean L. Donahue, and of course, follow us at Revolution Recap. With that, thanks again for listening, and we'll be back next week after hopefully some exciting fireworks in Colorado on the 4th.
Oh, yeah.